Alright, what is poppin', people? We're back. Today, I want to cover a Pokemon that a couple of ladder goons, honestly, been kind of tearing up the ladder with. So there's these guys, Togkien Valley, and they're at like, I don't remember what their elo is right now, but they're like mid 1700s or something on the NU ladder. I think they're undefeated still as well with over 50 wins, which is frankly unheard of, at least for recent generations of NU. Maybe early SM, because someone was mentioning that Teddy or Teddy, I don't know how to say the man's name, bro, but apparently he also had some insane streak. But these guys have been fiending it with some Tauros Spikes team, and I wanted to cover Tauros because I think it's a really interesting Pokemon. When you talk about on paper threat, sort of like a lot of other breakers, let's be real, a lot of breakers always have insane on paper threat, but I think Tauros is an interesting example because sheer force with this coverage and speed tier is really annoying for a lot of teams to deal with, at least in theory, I feel. How it plays out in practice, I do think, is a little bit more up for debate. But when you are building a team, I feel like the Tauros counterplay always, at least the reactive counterplay, always feels a little bit shaky. There are plenty of defensive Pokemon that do take like a hit from Tauros and then threaten it out. But usually that's it. It's like one hit. So when you're talking about some of the better Tauros switch-ins, also, my bad if you can hear the dog yapping. I don't know what his deal is. I don't know what he wants. I have nothing to offer him. But that's beside the point. A lot of these Pokemon take like one hit, and they don't really check it too well from then on out, unless they could find a way to get maybe like Wish recovery, or just maybe if they're one of those ones with like Protect, maybe they could stall for some lefties somewhere. But you'll see a lot of Pokemon, they take upwards of like 40 to 45 from one of Tauros' moves, and it's like, okay, have fun checking me the next time, Smile. And so a lot of the time, playing against Tauros, I feel, ends up being this game of just hoping you pivot around the moves that it wants to use properly. It's why a lot of the counterplay to Tauros, I feel, ends up just being like, I think he'll use this move here. Let me go into my resist. Then let me pivot into, hopefully, something I have faster. Because they're, Tauros' bulk isn't great. So a lot of the fast ones in the tier do revenge kill it. So it's like, okay, now let me pivot into one of my revenge killers. Hope that I get that move right as well. And then maybe I'm in a good enough position to force Tauros out. And to get the momentum back in my favor. And it makes, it's not a fun mod to try to play around. It's not like the slower breakers either, where it's like, most forms of offensive pressure can keep down, say, an Exploud or a Surfetch'd, right? They don't have horrible speed for breakers, but they're still pretty middling. And so, you can generally keep them contained through offensive pressure. I find with Tauros it's much harder, because, yeah, we have plenty of revenge killers that still deal with it, but, hey man, that's a much smaller pool than, say, how many things in the tier just naturally are gonna force out an Exploud, which, even easier to click one button with, but hey, that's another video. When we look at Tauros, what this mon does really well, we already went over that. When we look at Tauros and the moves you want to run, I think honestly this is the only 4 moves that are ever even worth considering. Earthquake, I think you could try to argue over CC. My main issue with Earthquake is the mons you want to hit with Earthquake are quite bad. It's like Garbodor. Okay, that mon's been relevant some point in the last 3 months, I'll give you that. And then it's like Wheezing, that mon was relevant in Gen 7 and you, tell me more. So you're not really looking at too much being gained from running Earthquake. It has 2 targets that are definitely on the like better end of reliability when dealing with Tauros. And we'll go over obviously like some of the ways I think are best, or some of the mons, I guess, that are best equipped to manage Tauros. Garbodor and Weezing are definitely both there. I just feel if you drop CC, the damage you lose versus certain neutral targets, and even, like, some other targets that you'd like lose a super effective hit on isn't worth it. And of course, Ironhead's like obligatory for DNC. You need that. You need it. It is not a droppable move. And a Throat Chop, I think I wouldn't drop it either, because I don't want to give leeway to random ghost types that maybe take like a hit, like Delmise for instance. Also hits Palisand, and I mean if you're running against Eternally, it hits his Kof Egregious, and that's, I think, pretty valuable. One of the nice things I do think about Tauros is just that physical bulk isn't that bad. And so I do think it's kind of cool to have this mon have a little bit more ease maybe against, say, like a Talonflame that wants to revenge kill you. Talon's still a great countermeasure to Tauros, I would say, but you do have to actually get Tauros a little bit lower with T-Flame, and so that's a little annoying at least. Now, I do think you could also justify Workup somewhere on here. It's over Ironhead or Throat Chop. I think generally I would say probably over Throat Chop, just because I really value the Diancie coverage. I don't think Workup Tauros is particularly amazing, because most of the time you have Tauros out, I think you gain a lot more just by throwing off Body Slam or CC. Or, you know, whatever move you need to hit to kill what's coming in versus you. But it's not a completely inexcusable move, so thought I'd mention it here. So we look at Pokemon that we have, that I'm deeming is good Tauros counterplay, right? Or at least reasonable counterplay. I think the bulkier Doublade spreads, I'm just throwing max HP there because why not? I think that's one of the better ones to mention up front. You know, if you're talking mons that can actually switch into Tauros' moves and not care, the Doublade's up there. Throat Chop does like 44 max if you're max HP. And obviously any other coverage move from Tauros is just bouncing off of you, so that's really nice. There, because you can hit it back with CC. Grab it pretty easily. And the nice thing about Doublade, I'm going to pronounce this mon several different ways. The nice thing about Doublade, too, is that the structures that you're always going to see it on are pretty much always going to be packing Wish. And while I don't have Sylveon and Vaporeon on here, mostly because like they're not incredible Tauros counterplay, they're just, in my eyes, too heavily pressured into rest looping. Or not rest looping, wish looping. But because those structures do pack those mons usually, you can typically keep the blade at a good enough amount of health so that it keeps switching into Tauros and really negates its effectiveness. And even just forcing it to throw off Throat Chops the entire game is, it's got value to it. And another mon that's very much like the blade is a Scavalier. A little bit more vulnerable because both Throat Chop and CC do pretty respectable damage to it, but you're still avoiding a 2-hit KO, and CC sends Tauros to the Shadow Realm, particularly if Tauros itself is using CC. And now we got just some generic like ground types. Also, another point like about the whole Earthquake versus CC thing, if Tauros runs EQ instead, then you can add like Ferroseed here. And while Ferroseed's by no means a metagame staple, we have seen it pop up in tournament play. I don't even want to say somewhat often, but like, it's a mon that in high level play, I think you do need to like, at least acknowledge the possibility of it being brought. At least in my opinion. Anyhow, next up, Mudsdale. Now, if you're like me, and you run those offensive in quotes, Mudsdale spreads that have a decent amount less physical bulk than maybe what's standard, which is like 212 HP, not HP. I would say this is probably what you're going to be looking at for standard. Maybe you even just say, I don't care about Delmise, and you get like full physical bulk. These Mudsdales, like, Tauros is literally not touching these. Body Slam does like 35 maybe on a good day. Might even do like, I don't think you do any damage really to Mudsdale. But if you're like me, offenses, I've seen my Tauros take, or not my Tauros, my Mudsdale take almost 50. Now, was that from Life Orb Tauros? Honestly, I'm not sure. They might have been adamant with a choice bed. But, this point being, these these Mudstales that are out here be making Tauros' life real rough. Tauros obviously can't just stay in and keep trying to attack you, because stamina. So, you know, maybe versus like a Deblade, you might be tempted to say, okay, I'm gonna throw off another Throat Chop, and maybe hope that you just mispredict. You know? Maybe you go for SD predicting me to go out to something else, or maybe you, Iron Head me instead of CCing me. Versus Mudstale, it's like, okay, stay in and attack me more. You might be getting damage on me. Mudstale, of course, being another Pokemon that you do frequently see with Wish. So it's like, getting damage on it's great. You just have to be cognizant of the potential for Wish passing. Like in that 1v1, Mudstale is pretty much always favored. And in Palisand's in a similar boat, where, obviously, we're talking Colbur Berry, because otherwise it's like, Tauros could probably get by you. Not Impish, Bold. Nice thing about Palisand too is you're targeting Tauros's weaker defensive stat. So you're, you know, maybe not as worried about Tauros randomly surviving 2 hits from you. The Taurus' physical bulk, like we said earlier, it's actually not that bad. But Palisand, Throat Chop does a lot, and I think without Colbur you do actually get to it KO'd. But if you have Colbur intact, you can at least tank 1. And you do switch into Taurus' other moves, at least respectably, so if they miss, or if they just throw off a Body Slam as you go Palo, you, I think, can take it on 1v1. And next mon, of course, Rhydon. Now, standard Dawn. We're talking just like, offensive rocks Rhydon. I believe, after a CC, and the Life Orb recoil and defense drop, you do always KO Tauros with an Earthquake. And CC is not a 2-hit KO on you, because the Violite on this mon is very, very good. So, yeah. You beat Tauros 1v1. Now, could it go for an Iron Head flinch? No, Sheer Force. I'm gonna keep it a buck at you. I started that off. And I was gonna say, yes, it could. And then I remembered as I was saying it, wait, nope, sheer Force says no, that's not a thing. Anyhow, Rhydon's another pretty good check. Obviously, no lefties does make it easier to take down. If we go back to the fabled core of Rhydon, Sylveon, Deblade that I did mention when I was doing the Deblade Spotlight, well, hey, there's your Wish Pass. And so you can keep this mon around a lot. Fun fact, that core was brought last week of SCL. If you watched my SCL coverage video, you would know that. If you haven't watched my Week 5 SCL replays coverage video, go watch that. It's a great watch. Got a lot of love, so I'm happy to see that. Yeah, again, I think a common theme that I do want to just touch on real quick. A lot of the mons that do check Tauros, it's like kind of conditional. Tauros can, you know, hit a lot of these mons really hard regardless. It's a matter of they aren't just, it's so like, think about like Copper Raja, right? It is a steel type, but it does not matter if you switch into Body Slam. You're getting clapped up by CC. And if you're like AV Raj with no HP investment, you are literally O-code by CC. Like that mon does not check you even if it gets like one read right. It's like the same deal with Diancie. Sure, you could switch into Body Slam, but Iron Head is coming your way, and it is going to kill you. So these are just like some of the defensive mons that, yeah, you can overwhelm them over time, because out of all of them, only Palisand is a reliable recovery, and without a Colbur Berry, Throat Chop is a little bit risky, but they still do, you know, they're like limiting to Tauros' ability to just get onto the field one time and then start like wreaking havoc. And then as we mentioned earlier, Garbodor and Weezing. Garbodor is not like some incredible check, but you take Body Slams well enough, you're not 2-hit KO'd, unless it's like with hazards up. And while you don't really threaten a whole lot of damage back, you trade health, essentially. What you're looking to do is punish Tauros for even considering attacking you. And if you're running that like spread that goes 80 HP, 252 defense impish with the rest in speed to give the jump on Adamant Sirfetch'd, then you can pretty much just force Tauros to almost self-KO, or maybe even self-KO. I would have to actually see that in practice to be sure. But you're able to make sure that you limit Tauros' long-term potential, which I think has some value to it. And in Wheezing, I mean, neutralizing gas. Now, I actually don't... This should make it so Sheer Force gets entirely negated. The only reason is that I'm going to say I don't know for certain is because for some reason the calc doesn't take into account neutralizing gas. Like when I was calcing Tauros versus Wheezing, it was still saying like Sheer Force, Body Slam. But I'm like looking there and I'm like, but I have the gas. And then I removed Sheer Force from Tauros's little thing, you know, and I gave it just some random other ability, and the damage did get reduced. So I don't know if that's just a calc bug or what. But even if you're like Levitate Wheezing, you actually still avoid a 2-hit KO from Tauros, which is really good. And then, you know, you could threaten it with a Wisp, Sludge Bomb Poison, you could Pain Split up against it as well. Generally good. And I'm gonna put Talonflame here. Not because Talonflame is a particularly good answer to Tauros, but you pivot into any move other than Body Slam and you constantly threaten a burn on it. And a burn Tauros is not a Pokemon. And you still shoot one Body Slam and you can like throw off a Desperation Wisp. Tauros is often paired with a Cleric, unfortunately. So it's not a great solution. If your only way of dealing with Tauros is Wisp it with T-Flame and sack your T-Flame. But if you've gotten rid of the Cleric, then there's that. And also, it does help that, you know, Talonflame is just one of the most frequently splashed on forms of speed to a team. And so, generally, you'll have, like, Talon plus one of these next few mons I'll look at. And between those two, you should be able to keep Tauros contained offensively. And then, for the litany of fast Pokemon, I don't know why I have Specs Helios here. It should be Scarf. But, Scarflisk, you don't Oko Tauros, unfortunately. You do like 60 plus with T-Bolt. It's like 60 to 66, around there. Maybe 60 to 67 or 8. But between potential like Helmet from Pokemon and Hazards, it's not too hard to get that damage on Tauros, especially if it ever is using like CC and, you know, donating some extra chip from Life Orb. And then another Scarf, of course, Pissimian. Pissimian even is, like, got enough physical bulk to switch into Tauros, which is cool. And of course, you just smash it in with CC. Salazzle, in specific, Overheat Salazzle. Now, I did give this... I had Sash in here. You could be Boots as well. Sash just... Sash means if you land, you get 2 shots. Land one of the Overheats. You could even go for Plot and then go for, like, Flamethrowers as it no-ko it. But yeah, Overheat Oko's Tauros unboosted. I think. Oh, you know what? I calced it, but I didn't calc it. I calced the damage of the other moves. And then I just assumed that Overheat did enough. Yeah, so I looked at this and I just said, surely Overheat does that much. Hey. All I'm saying is, I might be the best head calcer in the game. Oko's after rocks. Get at me. Yeah, so Overheat Lazo is a really good means of beating it. And if you're, like we said, if you're Sash, you can always plot up and then KO the next turn. And then the last one is Starmie. Obviously, keep in mind this is a non-exhaustive list. There are other fast Pokemon that take out Tauros. These were just the first 4 that came to mind, and 4 of the most common ones in NU. But Starmie Oko's Tauros after... It was either after Rocks or a Life Orb hit with Hydro. But obviously the point being, you don't need much chip. And that's the take with Tauros. You know, if you're talking about teams to use it on, Spike Stack is like probably the most tried and true Tauros archetype, like, dating back all the way to Gen 6 in you. It just kind of sucks that our best spiker, at least in terms of which one would pair with Tauros, is Garbodor, which isn't in a great spot right now. It loses to an awful lot, but it's still an okay enough Pokemon, and it has like weirdly decent defensive synergy with Tauros, just because you deal with Pissimian really well, which has been, you know, rising a little bit in usage lately. So that's cool. I think that's about it for this one. The Alaskan Bull Worm. It's a weird mod for me to try to rank. It's sort of like the Blade. I was having this chat with Expulsion. By this chat, I mean he just asked me, because I asked him, about my opinion on the Blade, and I was like, it's awkward enough. It's kind of awkward to build with, but it has enough of a threat level to where I still feel like I need to really pay attention to it when team building. To where I feel like it'd be somewhere in that like B plus A minus range. Tauros is the same for me. I don't really care where Tauros is, B plus or A minus. Looking at what was currently an A minus, because I checked yesterday, I decided that I think B plus is probably right for Tauros. Because there's like one other Pokemon, it was a Scavalier, I believe. And I was just like, I rate a Scav better than Tauros right now. So I'm gonna say Tauros probably okay in B plus. Anyhow, I hope y'all enjoyed this. As always, if you did, leave a like. Tell me what you liked about the video. And if you have gotten to the end of the video and you still haven't subscribed to the channel, well, I mean, I'd recommend it. I think these videos are pretty good. And guess what? If you're not subbed, you might miss one. And that would be, whew, imagine that. Anyhow, man, I hope y'all enjoy your day, and I'll catch y'all later. Peace.